Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Mancuso, and I serve as the Communications and Outreach Senior Specialist for the Summer Health Professions Education Program, also known as SHPEP. For those of you who are unaware, SHPEP is a free 6-week summer enrichment program for college freshmen and sophomore students who are interested in the health professions. Our application is open now, and if you want to apply, please visit shpep.org. Tonight's webinar will provide tips for how and when to ask for a letter of recommendation and will be led by Dr. Spears from our UT Health Science Center at Houston program site. Please be sure to use the Q&A feature to ask any questions throughout tonight's session. And as always, SHPEP webinars are posted on our YouTube channel within a week of the live viewing. Dr. Spears, feel free to take it away.
So thank you, Tony, and hello to everyone out there. It's great to be a part of this. I know most of you, it may be your first time to learn or hear something about SHPEP, but I really want to encourage you to find out as much as you can about this because it's such a phenomenal opportunity, such a great organization, and it'll do nothing but help you in your quest. So as Tony mentioned to you, I'm here at UT Health Houston. I'm specifically at the School of Dentistry. So for our SHPEP program, our SHPEP program represents 3 different health professions: medicine, dentistry, and nursing. And so as you explore the different, each of the 12 programs around the country, you will see that each of the different programs has different health professions that they target. We all do medicine and dentistry, and then we kind of incorporate other things into our each individual programs. So please explore about this, learn all about it, and find out the benefits that you can for this program. So my job this evening is to kind of come in here and tell you some things relative to asking for that letter of recommendation. And oftentimes that's a very intimidating thing. Students are hesitant a lot of times to go get a letter of recommendation. Who should I ask? Who should I talk to? Do they know me well enough to get a letter from? So we're going to try and cover some of these things, at least kind of go through the basics of this process. And so what I'm also going to do is I have some information on here I want to go through about resumes and how to write a resume and get something that you would want to present to someone who you would be asking for that letter of recommendation. You may be at a point as a college freshman, college sophomore, or what you might be. Do I really need a resume? And I'm here, I hope, to tell you, yes, please get a resume going. So let's get going and talk about how you go about asking for a letter of recommendation. So most of what I'll talk about, I'll probably get through the material maybe in about half an hour or so, and that'll leave plenty of time to answer questions and answer anything else that you might have. So if you don't mind, just kind of, I'll take questions kind of towards the end, or maybe as I finish asking about the letter before I get into resumes. We'll see. Let's go. Okay. So why is that letter of rec important for you? I don't want to just read bullet points to you, but as you can see up here, what you're trying to do is, hopefully you're applying for the SHPEP program. You eventually might be applying for a professional program such as medicine, dentistry, nursing, OT, PT, pharmacy, whatever the case may be. And the goal of that will be to convince an admissions committee that you are who they should be looking for, that you are that person that they are trying to identify in this process. Your letter of rec is typically going to be your first opportunity for a committee of some sort to know about you and to learn about you, okay? Letters of recommendation typically don't get you into programs, but they can darn sure keep you out of programs. So you're going to see as we go along how important it's going to be to make sure you're getting what it is that you want out of this, okay? So as I mentioned on the how there, about putting your best foot forward, it's this case of where you're going to be combining this with your personal statement. You'll be combining it with other things like your GPAs, your test scores, other things that different programs will want from you. You might be doing getting a letter of rec for a scholarship opportunity, for a job. These letters of rec, well, yes, we're focused on SHPEP here today, but they're important to understand the impact that these have at whatever level you're trying to use these for, okay? Each of you will have the opportunity to probably get letters of recommendation for different opportunities. Take them seriously and make sure you're following the right process in trying to get that. As I mentioned a moment ago, they are really a key and if you get interviewed or not. Okay, once you get into the interview, they still kind of come into play, but really it's the review process before you've gotten in for, a SHPEP program, before you've been accepted into a professional program, before you maybe get that scholarship. It's vitally important that you've got good letters in order to set the tone for you. And so it says, a lot of programs, I'll say, don't place as much emphasis on them. And it's why. You might not think you need to place as much emphasis upon them. So my question is, why not? Okay. So a lot of students will think, well, I'm not the one who's writing that letter. Somebody's writing this for me. So it's a case of where I can't control what somebody writes in my letter. While yes, that is true, hopefully in discussing these things with an individual, with somebody who's writing you that letter, you'll be able to know if that individual can write you a strong letter of recommendation or not. So your control in this process is knowing and being confident that the person who's writing for you will write an outstanding letter. Okay. So sometimes people in trying to go through this process don't know the right steps to go through in order to improve the reference letter this individual is going to write for you. So we're going to talk about how you go about getting this individual to write that really strong letter of recommendation that you want them to do. And as I mentioned, I see that there are questions that have started to pop up in the Q&A, and I'll get to those. I think I will. I'll stop at the end of rec letters before I go into resumes and answer what's popped up in the Q&A box. So I can tell you, as a school, as someone who reads letters of recommendation all the time, one of the biggest things that you hear from admissions committees, that you hear from SHPEP committees, what you hear from scholarship committees, is that so many people write things that are short, not specific. They're very vague in the content that they have. You question if this person really even knows you, and they're not very persuasive in making an argument for why you would be a strong candidate for that program. Okay, so sometimes schools, they'll look at them and it's kind of, okay, yeah, all right, no great letter. So that's why sometimes maybe they don't help you, but you're trying to get letters that will really help you and set the tone for the type of individual that you are. Strong letters indicate typically someone who has done their homework, has really gotten to know their faculty has gotten to know them, and it just kind of goes hand in hand that strong letters probably are going to indicate strong application. Who should write your letters? So it depends upon what you're applying to. If you're applying to the SHPEP program, it's a case of where, you're a freshman, sophomore, you're pretty novice and pretty new in the college career, and you're not going to have the same people that might be at your ability to write your letters you will when you become a junior or senior and you're applying to professional programs or whatever. As much as possible, wherever you are right now, start getting to know your health professions office. Go see, if it's the medical program, make sure the people who, are in contact with the, medical school, people who are ones with the, pre-medical, pre-dental, pre-nursing associations, make sure that they know all about you. And you don't want to be a stranger, because I can tell you, when you apply to, if you're applying to medical school, dental school, nursing programs, we typically want to see a letter coming from your health professions office. If you don't get a letter from your health professions office, we often ask, why not? Because we value them. They tell us a lot about you. So don't be a stranger. You got to get around and get to know people. We typically look at science professors as opposed to just any faculty, simply because most people want to see that you've got a strong science background in any program you apply to. And they can speak more towards your skills, your analytical abilities, critical thinking, that type of thing, than maybe your, math professor, or English professor, or whatever can. So if possible, as you go along, get to know some of your science faculty really well. If you've been involved with doing some sort of a research project at your school, your research mentor is a great person to write for you. They've been able to observe you. They've been able to observe your critical thinking skills, your hand skills, your ability to assimilate into a lab and work as a team or work individually. These are all important. For SHPEP, it may be that you're not too far along in things. It may be someone who has been your supervisor or a boss or whatever in an employment that you have can speak towards your punctuality, can speak towards your people skills, can speak towards different things that you've brought to that job. When you do apply to something that is a health profession application, as much as possible, you are going to want to get a letter of rec from a dentist, from a physician, from a pharmacist, from a nurse, or whatever. I can tell you here at the dental school, at our medical school, at our nursing program, we require a letter from a dentist, a physician, a nurse in the application process. So this is where you've been probably talking about doing shadowing and other things. That's where those things will come into play. So you'll see that last thing: develop, develop, develop. If you haven't already started this, you need to start developing relationships with your faculty, with your health professions office, with different people who can help you in this process. Now, you might be at a smaller college, a smaller university that doesn't have a health professions office or whatever. Okay, that's not uncommon or whatever. So who can you get that and establish that relationship with? Hopefully you have a pre-medical, pre-dental, pre-nursing, pre-pharmacy association at your school, or at least a health professions pre-association. And typically those associations are great for helping you make contacts and help you with all these different things that we're talking about tonight. And if you've attended the other sessions, they help you with all these different types of things. But I've got to encourage you today, if you haven't already started establishing relationships with people, get out there and do this. As you take courses, get to know your faculty, get them to know you. And this is a case of, I'm not talking about brown nosing, pardon the French here or whatever, but this is a case of not buttering up faculty or whatever, but it's a case of getting out there and just learning about them, getting them to learn about you. Okay. It's not just about grades. It's getting them to know you as an individual. How do you develop these relationships? Well, this first one might be a little bit more difficult in some of this COVID past year or whatever, but it's a case of where be in class. If you're somebody, if you're able to be in courses, if you're able to be in person, show up for class. If you're never there for class, even if you make a great grade, oftentimes faculty aren't going to write for you. I don't know the first thing about this person. I've never even seen them. Don't be someone that your professors think that of. Okay. Be in class. And when you're in class, ask questions, be involved, be actively engaged. Don't be someone who's sitting in there sleeping in class. Don't be someone who never is engaged and participates. Be engaged in the class. Find out your faculty's office hours and stop by, visit with them. I know it's one of those uncomfortable things sometimes of whatever. I can really just stop in to say hello and visit with faculty. Of course you can. It could be a case of where it's somebody who maybe you're thinking about getting in their research lab. Pop in and tell them, hey, I'd like to know more about your research. What are your expectations for your students? Different types of things. Pop in a faculty member's office. You probably always have some topic you could ask them about. Wow, I'm struggling a little bit with one of these concepts in my organic class. Could you kind of go through some of this with me or whatever? That's what office hours are for. Okay. You don't want it to be that the very first time that this faculty member has met you, or whoever has met you, to be the first time that you stop in and ask for a rec letter. That's not effective. And that's not a good way to go about this. You want to have established a relationship such that when you go in and ask for that rec letter, they're like, oh yeah, of course. I'm honored that you've asked me to write this recommendation letter for you. I've gotten to know you pretty well, and I feel pretty confident that I can write you a strong letter or whatever. So, find out about them or whatever. Sometimes maybe you're passing through the building, whatever, and you just kind of pass by somebody's office. Hey, Dr. So-and-so, just want to say hello. Hope everything's going okay. And, maybe it leads to conversation or maybe not. That's okay. They see your face. They get to know your face. They start thinking, oh, that's a really nice young man or woman or whatever. That's really nice of them to stop by and say that to me. Spend time with this person that you're wanting to get to write you a letter. There's nothing worse than somebody coming up and telling you, hey, I was in your, bio 101 class, and I'd really like for you to write me a letter. And all I know about them is whatever grade they made in the course. Okay. No, establish a relationship, get to them to know you, you to know them. Because you know what? Do this with a few different people. And before you've even asked them to write that letter, you're going to be able to figure out who's going to be that person or persons who can write you strong letters, who maybe, once you got to know them a little better, you might start thinking, no. I don't think this is the individual that I want to write my letter. So get them to know you and you to know them. It's a dual street, both ways. So make sure you're doing this. Okay, so what makes a really strong letter of recommendation? Okay, so sometimes in things that you apply to, they actually have a form that the letter writer is supposed to fill out and then include a letter attached with that. So what you want is for them to be able to have the ability to evaluate you on multiple fronts. Okay, so it's a case of, can they evaluate your intellectual capabilities, your research capabilities? Oftentimes, when you write letters, ask, what are your writing skills? What are your, when you talk, what are your verbal skills? Presentation skills. What are your ethics and professionalism? You oftentimes are asked to write about multiple things relative to this candidate, not just, oh, this person was in my class, they made a 92 and they attended class. No, you want them to be able to talk about more specifics than just that. Did you ask good questions in class? Are you someone who, went above and beyond? If you had to write a report, you wrote up lab reports for a lab. Are you someone who put extra effort into ensuring that you wrote a really good lab report and you just didn't go through the motions? Okay. You want this person obviously to know you well enough to be able to discuss your qualifications. This is probably going to come up in another slide, but I just want to say it right now. You want to know definitively if this individual is going to write you a strong letter, and there's no problem in asking, do you feel comfortable writing me a strong letter of recommendation? Most faculty are cognizant and will be aware of the fact that if you don't feel comfortable writing somebody a letter, or if you're not going to write them a strong letter, don't write them a letter. Don't bury somebody because of some personal beliefs or opinions that you had about individuals. But you want to make sure that that's what they're going to get, because you won't see this letter. They don't give this letter to you and then you turn it in. Your letter writer is turning that letter in. So you want to make darn sure you've got someone who will write you that strong letter. Okay. An overall assessment, but hopefully they've got supporting evidence for what they say. This individual is a great fit for medical school because they have done this, they've done this, not only their intellectual capabilities, but I've seen multiple examples of this person, their caring and their compassion for others. They're going to be a great fit for medical school, let's say nursing school, because they've worked great in team environments and team settings. They're going to be a great fit for pharmacy school because I've seen their critical thinking skills, I've seen their verbal skills, whatever, and they're, they got really good skills. So those are the type of things you want to come out in these letters. Okay, so a couple of do's and don'ts that we're going to be coming up here in a minute. So I've seen questions going by. So some of these will actually answer some of the questions that have been out there. You do not want to get or ask a graduate assistant, a teaching assistant, whatever, to write your letter. It's not seen by most programs as being at a professional level enough. They want this typically to come from, as I mentioned, a faculty member. They want to see it coming from, a supervisor. So you don't get TAs, friends, alums, typically not relatives, your clergy, politicians. That's not what most programs want, unless these people personally supervise your professional work and can comment on that. I know you might say, well, TA, they observed me in the lab and they read my reports. They're the ones who actually did my grading or whatever. I'm just telling you, typically programs don't want to see things come from a TA. Okay, that's just, how it works or whatever. Remember, this is not something that is a popularity contest. It's not something somebody's talking about, oh, you're the most popular person in the class. You're the most popular person in the school or whatever. It's not popularity that makes you important. And it's not, even as you're trying to approach a professor, it's not popularity with that individual, it's professional. Okay. So it's getting out of that mindset of popular versus professional. Just because you made good grades in a class does not mean this person will write you a good rec letter. Oftentimes faculty who you've had in some of your classes are too busy. They can't be bothered. Okay. They will not write you a good letter. And by meeting this individual and getting to know them, you'll know pretty quickly if this person is going to be one who will step up and write you a good letter versus somebody who's not going to do it. They're not going to be bothered or whatever. This last one is something that happens quite a bit. And you'll go to see some faculty and they might say, or employer, anybody, and they'll say, hey, you write your letter of recommendation, and then I'll just kind of maybe tinker with it and sign off on it or whatever. Don't do that. Walk away. If somebody says they want you to write your letter, that's not who you want writing your letter. Okay. Just walk away, go find somebody else. It's never a good idea. I can tell you from years of doing this, it never turns out well. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Okay. So asking someone, how do we do this or whatever? As I mentioned, timing is crucial on this. If you have an opportunity, you're supposed to turn in an app next week and you approach somebody, Friday, hey, could you write me a letter? It's due next week, or it's due next, whatever. That's not the way you go about it. That's not professional. And it's just going to frustrate the individual. They're probably going, nope, sorry, I don't have enough time. I can't do that. I'm busy with other stuff or whatever. So you need to be setting the course of this a few months in advance. Okay. Taking some time for them to get to know you, for you to know them. Okay. As I mentioned, you're typically in the middle of a semester is the great time to approach someone. Hopefully that this is not due to the end of the semester or something of that nature, but most faculty are least busy during the middle of the semester as opposed to at the beginning, at the end. You're always busy starting a semester and always busy finishing a semester. So, but take the time, okay? You want to go meet these individuals face to face, one-on-one, not by a phone call, not by an email, not by something you give to a secretary and then they pass on to the person. You go meet them face to face, okay? Now, it may be that other times or meetings, it might be like this. It might be by Zoom or by, a phone call or whatever. But that initial one, you need to walk in and introduce yourself, let them meet you, know who you are, even if it's for 5 minutes. Meet them face to face. Discuss what you're going to be getting to or whatever. Discuss issues, all this different stuff or whatever. Okay. As I mentioned, too bad I can't spell that one well. You're going to verify at some point that they're writing you a strong letter of support. Not just a letter, a strong letter of support. The last thing on here is you're going to make sure you follow up on this. So let's say you've met somebody, they're going to write you this strong letter of support, and you tell them it's due in a month. Don't just leave it at that, go away, and never check back with them. Gentle reminders are great. I don't mind somebody reminding me about, hey, remember this letter is due in 2 weeks. Oh yeah, that's right. I got to remember to write that letter for them. That is okay. Stop in, say hello. How's everything going? Do you need anything else for that letter? Do you have all the supporting documents and evidence that you need for this? So don't just stop in. Everybody agrees to a letter and then you walk away and you never visit with them again. Obviously, keep thanking them, keep asking if they need help with anything or whatever. Keep that relationship going. Okay, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to go back to the start. I'm going to answer a few of the questions that are there about letters and we can put some more stuff. So the very first one on here was about, if I take a gap year before medical school, when do I ask my professor or other associates if they can write me a letter of recommendation? Okay, so here's the case of where this really depends a lot upon when your application is for that medical school, or it could have been dental school, nursing, pharmacy, whatever. All right. So let's say, like most places, the application for a professional program is due in like May, June. That's typically what comes about. You want to have started this process, really going back to like January, okay, maybe February, giving them plenty of time to plenty of time to work on your relationship if it's not established already, but it gives them plenty of time to get that in place. The letters really aren't going to be due until, like May 1st, June 1st or whatever. But you want them to have that done in plenty of time so they get it in a timely manner. So this answer, there's not a definitive answer. It really depends upon when the application is due. It might be for a scholarship, like I said, it might be for a job opportunity. As much time as possible is what you want. The question is there a standard format for the letter of recommendation? Is the standard format less significant than a signed letter of recommendation? So typically when you go through this process, the signing, different applications want different things, okay? Typically, the faculty member or someone's going to sign their letter and upload it as a PDF or something, so it will be a signed letter. If it's just the form, you're still doing things to verify for the application service that this is you, the faculty member, doing this and not, a student doing it on their own or whatever. So I don't think that's as critical as some other things or whatever, signed or unsigned. Typically, any of us who write letters have a way of making sure the application is coming from us. Does the employer have to be from the health field? The answer is no. If you want it, remember, it's all about someone who can write you that strong letter. All right. If you've been working at Starbucks for 2 years and you've moved up from bussing tables to being a barista or whatever, hey, that's good. That person's going to be able to speak towards you. It's always good if you have things that are in the health field, but sometimes it depends on what this application is for. But for the most part, no, your employer, they will be able to speak volumes about you regardless if it was health field or not. Let's see, what suggestions do you have for students who have lost in-person connections due to COVID? Yeah, this is a tough one. This is a lot that's happening these days or whatever. We realize there's a lot of people in this sophomore, freshman years who've been virtual and don't still have those connections. I think you'll be surprised at how, if you had some sort of connection with someone, how quickly that can come back. I think most people are pretty cognizant and aware of what COVID has done to individuals, and that they realize it was hard to keep up relationships or whatever. So I think it's something that you can reestablish pretty easily or whatever. But if it's something that you can't, and sometimes what happens is you've got a great relationship with someone. Maybe you were working in the research lab and that person leaves and changes jobs. And that big person that you were considering, you were hanging your hat on to be that letter writer for you, leaves and goes away. Okay. Maybe you still have them do it, but maybe you can't. It's just, establishing a relationship with another individual. That's why try not to have just one relationship. This is where the more people who know you, the more, different faculty are able to know you and learn about you, the better off you are. Okay. So you might feel that you're behind right now, but knowing that you're behind, my question to you would be, what are you going to do to make yourself no longer behind? Okay. Hopefully January, next semester, you can get in there and get established or whatever. If you're worried about relative to SHPEP application, it might be this letter, kind of least resources. It's got to go from, a family friend. It's got to go from, your church or someone else. Just make it someone who knows you and can talk about you and your strengths. If you're applying to medical school, would it be better to get a decent rec letter from a chemistry or bio professor or a strong letter from a computational neuroscience professor? My answer is always going to be the strong rec letter, almost regardless of what it is. Now, I've got to put a caveat on there. Actually, not so much. All of these are science faculty, so it really, it doesn't have to be bio, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be chemistry or bio. A science faculty is what you want it to come from. Nobody's going to sit back and evaluate, oh, it came from chemistry versus it came from, your computational neuroscience professor. No, it's okay. It's a science professor, and you always want that strong rec letter. Okay. So what they are in the science field doesn't matter. It's that they're a science professor and they can write you a strong letter. What advice do I have for first quarter freshmen at very large schools so this is a great question, because it gets to, people who are at schools that either are virtual or let's say, a lot of those freshman courses, you're taking a class with 400 people. Okay. It's hard for sometimes faculty to get to know you, but you've got to be proactive about that. Even if you're in the building with a class of 400, stop up after class and ask a question. Okay. Stop by at office hours. Remember, there's other ways of getting that individual to know you beyond just a face in a sea of faces in a classroom or whatever. Can non-professors at the school who know you better write the letters? It depends upon what you're asking me for on this. If it's someone from like the health professions office, potentially so. Otherwise, it's a little bit more problematic. And again, remember, it kind of depends upon what we're talking about here. If it's for maybe a scholarship letter, you could probably get away with that or whatever. If you're applying to a health professions program, the answer is going to be no. All right, advice for alumni in gap years asking for letters when strong relationships were not made during college. Okay, that's a tough one, but my question would be, what are you going to do in your gap year? Would you not use part of your gap year to try and maybe build some strong relationships or whatever? Are you still taking any classes in your gap year? Are you doing any research? Are you assisting? Are you working at a hospital? Are you dental assisting? Are you working in a nursing program? What are you doing in that gap year that can help you build some strong relationships? If you're taking a gap year just to go tour Europe, it ain't going to help you. Okay. So you've got to sit back and evaluate and determine what can you do in that gap year to address this thing that you're talking about. Okay. If you don't have strong relationships, what are you going to do to build them? Can your volunteer supervisor give letters of recommendation? So the answer to this is yes. So typically, in most things that you apply to, you're going to have multiple letters of recommendation. All right. This would not be the strongest letter that you're going to get. But if you're still getting like your health professions, I'm thinking now more about applying to professional schools as opposed to SHPEP or some other things. If you're applying to medical school, dental school, whatever, like I said, we want to see a letter from a health profession. So a dentist, a physician, a nurse, or whatever. We want to see it from health professions committee, a college professor, a volunteer supervisor. If they let you do 4 letters or 5, an additional letter from someone like this would be okay. To me, it's borderline. It's not the strongest one that I would want to see, but it also depends upon what this opportunity that you're applying for is. How many letters should be from science professors? This depends upon what you're applying to. Like I said, most times applying to professional schools, you'll have 1 faculty letter. Okay, so you make sure it's the best one that you can get, because usually most applications is 3 letters. So 1 from a health professional, physician, nurse, dentist, pharmacist. 1 will be from your health professions office, or basically could be from your science faculty. So 1, maybe 2, no more than that. Okay. And again, it depends upon how many letters this application allows you to do. Should the letter of recommendation be sent to SHPEP by the writer or by, it's always by the writer. Almost anything that you're going to be applying to, you don't submit letters. Your people writing for you submit the letters. If a student submits a letter, I'm not taking it, not just for SHPEP, but pretty much for anything. I don't know if you send it, I don't know if this person really was the one who submitted the letter or who wrote the letter. Okay. So no, your letter writer submits the letter for you. Do the science professors that write your rec letters have to be your professors if you have a lab-based relationship, but never took their class? So if you tell me in this, you say a lab-based relationship, does this mean that you work in their lab? Is it a research lab? Is it a lab course? It's interesting to me how you have this relationship without them, but you didn't take their class or whatever. Maybe you're assistant, maybe you're working for them. You have a work relationship. It kind of depends upon what this relationship is. So it almost sounds like it's maybe more of an employer, or it could be a mentor-mentee type of relationship. In essence, that would probably be okay. Again, it kind of depends on what you're applying to. For SHPEP, it wouldn't be a problem. if I had a professor write me a letter of rec 2 years ago, but lost in touch. So most programs, most of anything doesn't want to see a letter from 2 years ago. You can still consider them. That's not a problem, but they need to write you an updated letter. Okay. That's one thing. Do not use letters. So if, let's say you applied for a scholarship 2 years ago, and now you want to use that letter for SHPEP or for health professions applications, no. Get an updated letter, because hopefully you've improved yourself. You've done more things since that first letter was written, and there's more things that an individual could write for you than what they wrote about 2 years ago. So it's okay to go see them and update them. Hopefully you've been keeping in touch with this individual and they still know about you, and they can improve that letter and write about other things. How long should a rec letter be? A page to a page and a half max. And it depends upon what things allow you to do. If you go beyond, if you're a letter writer, and they should know this shouldn't be anything that you've got to tell them. Sometimes if it's part of an application, there'll be limits on what they let them do. Sometimes they might limit them to, like 2,500 characters or 1,000 words or whatever the case may be. So sometimes you're limited on how long a rec letter can be, but the typical page, no more than a page and a half is what's typically acceptable. And I'll answer this last one. They'll need to get onto resumes. What can I do to make sure writes me a strong letter of recommendation if I don't have a strong connection with them, but they are my only option? Boy, that's a rough one. I'd like to think that you don't. I mean, let me tell you just straight up front. You better know darn sure how do you make sure they're going to write you a strong letter. That's where you got to get in there and establish a relationship, find out about this individual, and make sure that they will be confident to write you a strong letter. Okay, that's a hard one, and you got to work now, today, to get in there with them. I'll answer this. Literally is the last one. Part of a PhD training program. Left after deciding to go pre-med. So this all depends upon what type of circumstances you left under. Did you just basically bolt on this program and it was not a good situation? If so, yeah, they're not going to write you a strong letter. How do you rebuild it? That's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort on your part. If you think they're worth it, if you think that this is someone that you can reestablish it, you just got to tuck your tail and go see them and check on them. Don't start off with it being about you. Start off with it being about them. Hey, how's it going? How's life been? Don't even get to the letter that first time you go see them. Just go back, visit them. Hey, I've really missed our conversations. I missed, the interactions we had or whatever. I dropped out of the program, but it's a case of where it's something I had to do at the time, but I don't want to lose the relationship that we had. Try from that standpoint. Okay, hopefully that helped. Let me take a swig of some water here. Okay, so let's talk about resumes for a minute, because oftentimes you will need a resume. And I know you're freshmen, you're sophomores, you think you might not need a resume, but that's not true. Okay, so even as a freshman, do you need one? And the answer is definitively yes. You'd be surprised at opportunities that come along that you will need a resume for. Okay, maybe you're going to apply for a job, even if it's a part-time job. Maybe a scholarship opportunity comes along. Maybe a research opportunity comes along. Who knows what it might be, but I'm going to tell you today, you need a resume. Okay, you need it. So we're going to start thinking about what this resume is and what you're going to be doing today. If you don't already have a resume, I'm going to get you to start building a resume today, tomorrow. Get this going. This is how you market yourself. Yes, you're going to go talk to individuals and you hope that they know about you, but let's be honest. Even a lot of these college professors, you've established a relationship. They've gotten to know you, but they don't know everything about you. Without sitting down there and spending an hour or 2 hours updating a faculty member about your life and what's been happening, would it be nice to just hand them a one-page resume that will get towards who and what you are and what all that you've done. Okay. So it says here, it's intended to try and help you get an interview. It's trying to help you get an opportunity that you maybe wouldn't get otherwise. The key, keeping it concise and accomplished focused. What have you done? You're going to see bullet points I'm going to go through and things that you're going to want in there. And there's not one specific format that you have to use, but I'm going to show you some ways to go about this. But what I've got to get you on is this part right here, whatever, of you've already decided, okay, I'm going to start a resume. And then as you go along, keep that resume updated. I can tell you as a faculty member, that's one of the biggest things for us or whatever. We have to keep a professional resume. And there's stuff that I do all the time. Tonight, I'm doing a presentation for SHPEP. I will go into my resume after this. I keep a yearly chart and I will go put down that I did this presentation because you know what? In 2 weeks, in a month, I'll have forgotten that I did this. We're all human. That's what's going to happen to you. If you don't keep track of things as they happen, you'll forget about them. Don't be that person. Okay. So this will help with that thing. Will my high school resume work? No. And typically things that you did in high school are not something that's going to put on your resume. High school was high school. This is college and beyond now. Okay. Now, that said, there are some things that you did in high school that can be important. So there's things like your volunteerism. There's things like community service. So, as a freshman, especially, what else are you going to write about beyond kind of what you did in high school or whatever? You don't want your resume to be just high school. So maybe you've got a few high school things in there as you start your resume, but once you get to become a senior, you're not getting that high school. Each year you kind of build upon the previous year. And by the time you become a senior, hopefully you're not putting this high school stuff in there anymore. You've got more things in your resume that will be speaking towards you than what you did in high school. Okay. So again, I got to put a caveat on about this, no, typically you don't want high school stuff in there. But, many of you here in this talk tonight are first semester college freshmen. And, you might not have a whole lot of other stuff other than some high school things. I get that. Okay. So remember, your college resume is what we're typically going to see because it speaks more about what you are, what organizations have you been involved with, what volunteer activities have you been involved with, have you done any shadowing? Do you have any scholarships? Do you have any other things that you can contribute and put in here that we did? Okay. So the question just popped back, can we include some research and stuff as a high school? The answer is still yes, but hopefully by the time you can become a senior, that's not stuff that you're still including in your resume. How do you begin? Okay. I mean, you can Google and pull up 1,000 different things on the internet relative to creating a resume. But what you really want to be thinking and focusing on is your experiences, skills that you might have. A resume is not so much, you're not talking about your college grades and that sort of thing. It's talking about skills, experiences, activities, awards, projects, all these different things you see listed here that you've been involved with. And think about it. Yes, you're going to keep a running resume, but you might tailor your resume, if you will, towards a specific opportunity that you're applying for. Okay. And you're going to organize it in a certain way. So this next slide will show you what I'm talking about. So, each of these things could be a category in a resume. Okay. And so it's a case of where, each of these topics can be things that you have things that are important in. Nobody says you've got to have every one of these things on a resume. And let's be honest, probably everybody's not going to have all these things on their resume. Okay. But it's these things where it says relevant. That's kind of what's important. You don't want to just put down coursework. If you're applying for a job in a science lab, okay, nobody in that science lab is going to care that you got some courses in English or history or whatever. They'd be very important. You're applying to some organic chem lab, and you've had OChem and you did really well in it. Okay, Relevancy is a lot of what's important here. Experiences are important. Okay. All kinds of different ones or whatever. You know, it depends a lot about what it is that you're applying for, but these are great topic areas to be focused on. And even if you made these kind of bullet points inside your resume right now, maybe today you don't have some things in here, but if you keep these as topics in your resume, as these things might happen to you, you're like, oh yeah, there's something I can put into the leadership experience box. Leadership's hard to get. Maybe you got to be, active on a committee and you got elected as secretary or treasurer or something for a certain group or whatever. Oh, hey, there's a leadership experience I can put down or whatever. So it never hurts to have these different topic areas in your resume for your purposes that you're going to update, weekly, monthly, whatever the case may be. And you might start off with nothing. Maybe you don't have any awards and honors today. Maybe next month you do. Maybe later you will. This is some kind of do's and don'ts, and I don't want to typically spend a ton of time on some of these or whatever. I'll answer some more questions. But again, going back to what was asked about for the rec letter, keep resumes short, concise, to the point. Typically a page to page and a half resume is all anybody's going to want to see. If you provide somebody with a 6-page resume, they're never going to go through 6 pages of resume. Okay, I'm just telling you, don't. You want to be consistent throughout. If you use bullet points all the way or whatever. Don't make it look like different sections were written by different people or different things or whatever. It's professional. It speaks about you. So be consistent in the format that you use. I said update at least once a semester. Man, you update it all the time when you can, when you got something to update it with, but make sure at the end of a semester, you sit down and reflect and think about, was there something that happened this semester I didn't put down? This other stuff is just kind of, there's no definite right or wrongs about this or whatever. Make it in a font that you can, don't get fancy. Don't use one of these crazy fonts. Don't do that. Times New Roman Arial is typically the ones that are professional, and use a font that's easy to read. Don't be giving you think, oh, he only wants it as 1 page, so I'm going to use 6-point font in that resume. Dear God, nobody can read that. And if you give me a 6-point font, I'm just throwing it in the trash. I'm not even reading it. Vice versa, don't give me a 16-point font where you can tell, okay, this person doesn't really have much to put in their resume, so they're gonna make it as large as possible. It's kind of the same thing with like your margins. Have normal margins, 1-inch margins. Oh, that's perfect or whatever. Don't be going to, like 2.5-inch margins because you don't have much to say and you're gonna make it look, I can fill up a page better. No, okay, that's not what we're doing here. So there's the margins. Don't worry about that. If you send stuff, send it always in a PDF or something of that nature. Don't send it in a Word format or something that can be modified. All right. I realize somebody can take a PDF and translate it, transform it into Word, but you send it in a PDF or whatever. Use normal language. You don't want your resume or anything that you write. You don't want to read like you sat down with a thesaurus next to you and try to use as much glowing, different words as possible. Be you. Let me tell you this thing right here. Be 100% honest on your resume. I cannot stress to you enough. Do not falsify your resume. Do not put information down that's not correct and that's not honest. You got to stand behind it. All the time, people get busted for putting stuff in their resume and they get caught putting things that weren't, true. Don't do that. If you can't be honest, don't put it down. Put it on good paper. Don't put it on scented paper. Don't put it on, some sort of colored paper. Don't send it in on purple paper, pink paper, blue paper, or whatever. That's not professional. Good quality paper, and don't scent it or anything else. And then this last bullet point here about make sure you're getting other people to read your resume before you submit it for something. Don't just you be the only one who's ever read your resume. Get it to somebody else and they can tell you, oh yeah, this is a good resume. It's very professional versus, oh my God, what are you saying here? This is crazy. Don't do that. Some don'ts about this process is, sometimes people send stuff and put it down as their email address, something that's just kind of a crazy, unprofessional email. use a Gmail address, your school email address or whatever. Don't go doing stuff that's out there that's kind of weird or whatever. Bullet points work much better than putting stuff in a paragraph form. It's best if you don't, I mean, you don't need to put personal details or whatever. Okay. Unfortunately, in this day and age, putting things, especially about your religion and citizen, these different things, they can turn some people off. Don't do it. I mentioned these. Don't embellish, don't repeat, and have someone have looked at it. All right, so that gets us through resumes. I always like this last thing, and I suspect this is a lot of people or whatever, okay? If you're aware of what imposter syndrome is, so many individuals in your position right now, you know, I don't know if I'm good enough to be applying. I don't know if I'm really the right person or whatever. So get rid of that baggage, okay? Don't keep negatives in your life or whatever, and don't be afraid of failure. You'll never get anything if you don't apply for it. Don't give this attitude of, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not qualified enough or whatever. You don't know till you try. Oftentimes it might take multiple applications before you get that job or before you get that scholarship or whatever. You can't let fear of failure prevent you from accomplishing great things. Okay? All right, so I will stop there. I don't see anything else in the box, but if anybody else has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything.
Hey, Dr. Spears, as we wait for students to provide questions, I had a couple on my end.
Sure.
So what are some of the common mistakes you've seen from letter writers?
You know, it's a great question for me. And the biggest thing is not being honest with the student and themselves, whether they're going to write that strong letter or not. We have a student here who, unfortunate situation, had applied for a residency program and thought the person who was writing for them was going to write them a great letter. They didn't, and they found out in an interview that they got a bad letter from someone at the school. That's just the wrong way to be about it. I think the other mistake you see from letter writers is not getting to know the individual. You know, oftentimes faculty are bad about using form letters. You know, I've written a letter and I'm just going to change somebody's name and submit that letter or whatever. And unfortunately, something in that letter will say something about, oh, this person is really interested in medicine when it's really nursing that they're applying to. And it throws a lot of confusion to the applications, the services or whatever to us as schools when we get those sort of things. I think that's some of the biggest things that you see or whatever. It's making sure that person knows about you and will write you that strong letter. You know, as faculty, especially busy faculty or whatever, it's easy to, oh, I got a good form letter here. I'm just going to modify it for this individual, whatever. And they don't read through it well enough to realize they've left things in that they should have taken out.
Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, I guess on my end, as I'm thinking about, you know, you went over resumes, you went over the letter of rec. Do you suggest students for them to share their resume with their letter writer? And what are the benefits of doing so?
Oh, I definitely recommend that they do that because, as I mentioned, that letter writer might know certain aspects of you, but maybe they don't know all the different things you've involved with. And maybe they don't know, oh my gosh, look at how much shadow. I didn't know they worked while they were going to school. Look at how much community service they've done. This person really has a heart and compassion for this health profession. So yes, your letter writer typically gets to know certain things about you and maybe quite a bit, but there's almost no way they're going to know everything about you. And I think I can tell you as an individual, I value and appreciate that someone has provided me with a resume. And there's nothing saying I've got to use everything that's in that resume, but it helps me get a feel for the individual, maybe more so than that sort of thing. So I see it. So it says I had an exact same thing happen to me 2 weeks ago. I had excellent performance in one of my classes. Impressed. As a letter, a job opportunity was rescinded 2 weeks ago after he wrote in the letter of recommendation. I would not hire this person. Yeah, you know what? This really is one of those things that bothers me greatly because that person shouldn't even written you that letter. If they can't write you, if they're not going to write you the good letter, don't basically bury somebody just because of your opinion. And I don't know. That's unfortunate. I'm sorry that's what happened to you. Subtle signs that a professor might not run. You know, that's really a great question. And sometimes there's no way to pick up on it. Maybe that previous person who wrote that last comment, there was no way they could have known that that was going to happen to them. I think subtle things is, you know, you go in and if the person never, and they don't know your name, if they never use your name, you know, it's kind of one of those things, does that person really know you? I think, you know, they call you the wrong name all the time. I think it's a case of where if they're dismissive, if they're not really focused on you, if you're in there talking to them, you can tell that really they're, you know, even like you're on Zoom or something, if they're typing in on something else, if they're reading emails or doing something else or whatever, you know, maybe not really focused on you and going to be that right person or whatever. If possible, it never hurts to ask other students if they've had someone write letters for them and find out their experience or whatever. That's about as good as you can get. Unfortunately, there's just times where you just got to make your best assumption about that individual. I just say, if you've got any doubts at all, walk away and go find somebody else who's going to be better at writing you that letter. And I'll tell you also, just because someone, you might think they are prestigious, okay, ooh, this is the highest funded faculty member in our school, doesn't mean they're going to write you a good letter. Oftentimes they don't care about writing letters for anybody else. So they're not really focused on anybody else other than themselves, their research. So prestige by itself doesn't necessarily make that person a great letter writer.
So Dr. Spears, do you want to give us any final parting words as far as, you know, what could be useful as far as a letter recommendation is concerned?
Yeah. So I'll answer in this question in just a second. So my answer is going to be, you're not at a disadvantage, and I'll explain why in just a minute. So yeah, you know, I guess pieces of advice, the things that I've learned over the years about this is, you know, the things that I stressed for a reason. Getting related, you know, as a faculty person and having written hundreds of letters for individuals or whatever, you know, it's valuing that individual who's made the effort to help me know them and them, you know, them to know me, to know my, how busy I am at certain times or whatever, and when's going to be the best approach, and not coming to me at the last minute. There's not much more frustrating. I'd love to write somebody a strong letter, but when you've given me 2 days, 3 days to write you that letter, that's just not being realistic. It's not valuing my time. Okay. It's a two-way street here. And so we're each going to value each other and try and do the best that we can in that process. So I think that, so if you're referring on the question about first quarter freshmen, if you're talking about the application process for like SHPEP or something of that nature, whatever. So I understand why you would think you would be at a disadvantage, and maybe in a little bit that you can or whatever, but it's a case of where you're learning about this process now, and hopefully you'll utilize your time. Now, remember, applications for SHPEP are not due until February. So it gives you a little bit of time to strengthen a relationship with someone and get out there and get to know them. If there's a case of where, oh, COVID, I'm not even on the campus, I'm not even, you know, there or whatever, how am I going to establish a relationship? That is tough. And it is a challenge or whatever. Obviously, in our programs, all, you know, the 12 programs around the country, we take freshmen every year. We're not just taking nothing but sophomores or whatever. We all take freshmen. So remember, a letter, it speaks towards you, and it's an important part of it, but it's just one part of the application process. Okay. So it's multiple things. We're looking at, you know, you hear, if you haven't heard this term yet, you'll hear people talk about holistic review. And what that means is we look at every part of your application, not just, we don't focus on one little thing or one thing. It's everything that you're putting into that application. They all come into play. And we realize a freshman might not have the opportunity for as many strong letters as what someone else might have. So I understand why the thought would be you're at a disadvantage, but we're very cognizant of that as well. And we don't let that just simply overwhelm the process. Teaches a science-based English course. So for you right now, for SHPEP, I'm just going to keep focusing more on strong letter from whoever it may be. Okay, especially if you're a freshman. Yes, we would love it to be from a science professor of some sort. That's really the best. But if you don't have that, don't just go get someone to write a letter for you just because they're in the science field. Strong letter, strong letter, strong letter. That's the takeaway from this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spears. I think I speak for everyone in saying that, I've learned so much. I think, this session resonated probably with everyone here, and it's really going to help them on their path as either they apply to SHPEP or just to a health professions program. I see that a couple questions are trickling in right now. That's probably like,
Yeah, I'll take these last two because believe it or not, I'm actually leaving here and going to go speak at a college pre-dental program. So I got to head that way. Can it be a calculus prof? Sure. At this level, like I said, for SHPEP or something, yes. Typically, if it's going to be for a professional application, at like trying to get into med school, dental school, whatever, no. That's not typically what we're looking for. If my GPA is average right now, would you recommend waiting for the semester to end or send in transcripts? Well, typically we're going to prefer transcripts coming in at the end of the semester. We want to see as much transcript wise as we can. So even if you have the strongest GPA in the world, I'm going to tell you it's best if you send your transcript in with as much completion as you can. All right. Don't let that keep you from applying, but hopefully, by January, you've got that transcript or whatever. So also, let me just answer a little bit different factor about that or whatever. I think sometimes when people are applying for SHPEP, they think they have to be 4.0 and they've got to be the most amazing individual on the face of the earth. Okay. Well, one of the focuses and goals of this program is to help people who are in, underserved, economically disadvantaged programs who maybe aren't that 4.0, who could use our help in strengthening their application to make themselves competitive. So being an average GPA is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's not going to keep you from getting into a SHPEP program. Now, I'm going to qualify this and just say, if you're somebody sitting there with a 1.0 GPA right now, no, you're probably not going to get into a SHPEP program. But if you're sitting there with a 3.0, maybe you're sitting there with a high 2 GPA or whatever, this is the type of program that can help you. And so we're not just looking for the best and the brightest. You can be that, okay? But it's meant to help all kinds of different individuals to be competitive for that professional school application.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Spears. And, I know you have another session you're going to head to. So have a good evening, everyone.
No problem. I hope this was helpful. You can always reach out to the program. You can find any of us or whatever, and we're more than happy to answer questions that come up at another time. So I appreciate y'all hanging in there and letting me talk to you. Thanks a lot. Y'all take care. Best of luck with whatever application. Start that relationship today. Start your resume tomorrow, or whatever. Get it going.